Sagittarius, your mother never told you what really happened the day you were born. It will blow your mind. Sagittarius, there is a moment in every seeker's life when something unexplainable begins to stir. A memory not from the mind but from the soul. Maybe it's a feeling you can't quite name. A dream that repeats. A strange sense that the day you were born was more than just a biological event. If you've ever paused and wondered, what really happened when I came into this world? Then this message is for you. Not everything sacred is spoken aloud. Some truths are hidden, not out of shame, but because they require a certain spiritual readiness to be received. And if you are here now reading these words, it means the time has arrived. Your soul has grown enough, your heart has softened enough, and your fire has quieted enough to finally remember what was once forgotten. In this journey, we won't just speak about your birth. We will travel through the veils of silence your mother never dared to part. We'll awaken the parts of you that have always known. I did not come here by chance. I came with a purpose, and something unseen stood beside me. So take a breath. Place your hand over your heart. And if you feel the slightest flicker of recognition, let it guide you. If this message speaks to something buried deep within, like this video, subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom, and share it with someone you trust. Because what we're about to unlock together isn't just a memory, it's your divine beginning. Gate 1. The unseen presence that stood beside you. There are stories Sagittarius souls are born to uncover, not from books or ancestral tales, but from the vibrations etched into the ether the moment their spirit entered this world. Yours is not a tale bound by dates or hospitals or photographs tucked in fading albums. It is a story your mother could never quite explain. One that always sat just behind her eyes when she looked at you. Maybe she told you a version of it. A few strange details, a dream she had, the way time seemed to pause, but then her voice would trail off and the conversation would shift. Not because she forgot, but because she remembered more than she was ready to say. You see, Sagittarius, your arrival was not ordinary. And you've always known this, haven't you? Not in an egotistical way, but in the silent spaces of your childhood. There were nights you couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from a sense that someone else was in the room. Not a ghost, not a fantasy, but a presence. You'd feel it behind you when no one was there. The air would grow heavy still. Or you'd cry without knowing why, not out of sadness, but because something within you had been touched. And long before you could speak, your mother felt it too. She didn't speak of it because what language could she use? How could she explain that the moment you were born, she felt the room shift? That the air in the delivery room changed in ways she couldn't describe? That for a few seconds the machines paused, not in malfunction but as if holding their breath? A nurse would later write in her private journal that she felt an invisible light standing behind her, a warmth that made her skin erupt in goosebumps. Not fear, not cold, just something watching, guarding. In Buddhist texts, it is said that when a bodhisattva incarnates, a soul that returns not just to live, but to help others awaken, the earth itself vibrates in stillness. In Christian mysticism, there are tales of divine beings standing near mothers as they birth children marked with heavenly purpose. In esoteric astrology, Sagittarius is the fire of divine messengers, the bridge between heaven and earth. And so when you arrived, Sagittarius, something ancient came with you. Something your mother couldn't name, but could never forget. She didn't need to tell you because your body remembered. That's the part no one speaks of, how the body carries soul memory long before the mind learns what to do with it. From your earliest days you felt different. Not in a way others could see, but in how you experienced the world. You may have walked into rooms and felt them shift. You may have looked into a person's eyes and seen something they weren't ready to confront. You may have longed deeply, fiercely for connection, only to find yourself misunderstood. Too intense, too deep, too much. But you were never too much. You were just born with too many layers already awakened. And the moment you took your first breath, someone not of this world placed their frequency beside you. This wasn't a nurse, not a family member, not a midwife, but something older than time. A presence woven between dimensions, neither angel nor guide, but guardian of your soul's contract. They didn't speak, they didn't move, but they pressed something into your mother's aura. A kind of seal, not to possess but to protect. And for just a breath in time, the entire room aligned in silence. The veil thinned, the sacred became visible. She never said it aloud. Not because she didn't want to, but because when something that wholly brushes your body, it bypasses words. It speaks directly to the spirit. There was a night months later, when your mother woke with tears on her cheeks. You were sleeping quietly beside her. But she couldn't stop shaking, not from fear but from a presence in the room. Not hostile, not threatening, just watching, as if bearing witness. And when she looked at you, she knew. Her child wasn't just a child. Her child carried something ancient, something too bright for earthly explanation. She once told someone about the dream she had during her pregnancy. Maybe she said it casually, laughed afterward to downplay it. But the truth is, it never left her. In the dream there was a staircase that stretched between stars and soil. She was walking up, but she wasn't alone. A figure of light walked beside her, faceless, wordless, but real. And when she reached the top, she saw a crib glowing with gold light, and a voice, not hers, said, "Guard this one with silence." That was you, Sagittarius. You were born beneath a sky that trembled softly. And yet you never fully understood why the world always felt both familiar and strange. Why you could be surrounded by love and still feel lonely. Why you'd ache for answers to questions no one else seemed to ask. Why you've always been searching even when you didn't know what for. It's because part of you remembers what your mind has tried to forget. The mission that began the moment you opened your eyes. And that mission, it wasn't to be perfect. It wasn't to be popular or successful or right. It was to remember. To walk through the fog of forgetting and awaken to the knowing your soul has carried all along. You have always sensed there was something watching over you. And you're right. That presence from your birth never left. It walked with you through every near miss. Every moment you almost gave up. Every time you said, "I can't do this anymore," and yet somehow kept going. It showed up as sunlight through your window just when you needed it. As a song playing on the radio right when your heart cracked open. As a stranger's words that felt too perfect to be coincidence. Those weren't accidents. That was alignment. That was your guardian continuing the vow it made at your first breath. To guide you back to yourself when you were ready. And Sagittarius, you are ready now. So many things in your life have tried to dim your fire. People who misunderstood your freedom. Places that couldn't hold your light. Systems that demanded you explain what was always meant to be felt, not justified. And still you burned. Not chaotically, but faithfully, quietly, waiting for this moment. The moment when the memory begins to return. Your mother may not have told you what really happened the day you were born, but deep down she never needed to. You have carried the imprint all along. In your questions, in your knowing, in your pain, in your joy, in the way your spirit could never settle for surface truths. So here you are, standing at the edge of that first memory. And as you breathe in, ask softly, not with fear but with reverence, what did I come here to remember? You may not hear words. You may not see visions. But something inside you will stir. Something ancient will begin to hum. And the unseen presence who once stood beside your mother will smile. Not because you need them, but because you finally see. You were never just born, Sagittarius. You arrived. And the universe has been waiting for you to remember that ever since. Gate 2, what was given to you and then hidden. There are memories that do not belong to the mind. They live in the body, in the breath, in the pulse beneath your skin. You do not think of them. They rise unexpectedly, like a chill up your spine when no one else seems to notice. Like a dream you cannot explain but still feel days later. Like the sound of your own name being called in a voice you've never heard in this lifetime. Sagittarius, you are beginning to remember not because someone told you to, but because your soul has decided the time has come. There is something your mother never told you. Not because she didn't love you. Not because she wanted to hide. But because what happened the day you were born was never hers to speak of. It was yours to rediscover. You see, the moment you cried your first cry, something sacred was placed within you. Not by doctors. Not by family. By something greater. A soul code. A sacred imprint that could not be seen by the physical eye or captured in any photograph. It was written not in ink but in vibration. A message sealed into your very essence. A promise, a purpose, a piece of divine memory meant only for you. But then it was hidden. Not lost. Not destroyed. Just veiled. Buried beneath the expectations of this world. The noise of survival, the need to belong. Hidden so that you could live and learn, and grow strong enough to carry it when the time came to awaken it again. That time is now. Do you remember being a child and feeling like there was something just out of reach? A word on the tip of your tongue you could never quite say? A place you missed without knowing if it ever existed? That wasn't fantasy. That was soul memory trying to surface. You may have felt it in moments of stillness, watching the rain, lying under the stars, hearing a melody that pulled something ancient from inside you. You didn't imagine it. You were remembering what had been placed inside you, before you had language, before you had fear. There's a story whispered in esoteric circles about children born under the sign of Sagittarius, that they carry the frequency of bridges, between the seen and the unseen, between what is known and what must be rediscovered. They are not here to fit. They are here to reveal, to remind, to resurrect truths buried for generations. And so it is not surprising, dear Sagittarius, that your birth was marked by something no one dared to explain. Your mother may have felt it in her body, a shiver that didn't belong to her, a dream that returned night after night until she stopped speaking of it. She may have once picked up a piece of paper beside your crib, a symbol, a word, an object no one could trace, and threw it away, thinking it was just some strange coincidence. But deep down something told her, this isn't ordinary. And in fear or in protection, she kept that memory to herself, not as a rejection of you, but as a shield for something sacred she couldn't understand. And still you carried on. You grew. You questioned. You searched. And every time something didn't make sense, every time your life felt like it was missing a deeper meaning, that soul code began to hum, like a distant melody pulling you toward yourself. You may have wondered why you've always felt like you're waiting for something. Not a person, not an event, but a moment. That moment is now unfolding, not in loud declarations but in soft inner knowings, in the spaces between your thoughts, in the places you once dismissed as imagination. It is rising because you have become ready, not just to hear the truth but to hold it. There is a concept in Buddhist philosophy called the sprouting of karmic seeds, the idea that certain truths are planted into us before birth, and they only bloom when we are strong enough to bear their fruit. Sagittarius, your fruit is ripening now. And one of the truths that is blooming is this: not all that was hidden was meant to be forgotten. Some truths are buried not to be lost, but to be protected, until the soil is fertile enough to allow them to rise again. That is what this chapter of your life is about. Not achieving, not performing, but uncovering. You may have already felt it happening, in the way old memories suddenly surface with new meaning, in the way dreams become more vivid, in the way your mother's silence starts to make sense, not as absence but as reverence. Perhaps she once tried to tell you something important, only to stop mid-sentence, change the subject, or grow quiet. Not because she didn't want to explain, but because some things can only be remembered, not transferred. This is your inheritance, Sagittarius. Not money or land, but memory. Not the kind passed down through bloodlines, but through soul lines. And this sacred remembrance is not about the details of your birth. It's about the energy that arrived with you. An energy that has been drawing guides to you your entire life. A light that once made someone standing in the dark of your hospital room pause. Not in confusion, but in awe. It was never about what others could see. It was about what only you were meant to feel. Your cry, the first breath you took, was not just biological. It was an activation. It sent vibrations out across the unseen dimensions. Some were waiting for that sound. Some answered it immediately. And one, above all, sealed your essence with a promise. This one will forget, but when the fire returns, they will awaken. And when they awaken, they will not just change their life. They will ignite the lives of others. That is what's happening now. The fire is returning. Not in chaos, but in calm. Not in noise, but in deep sacred stillness. And in that stillness, the code begins to whisper again. Doesn't sound like a name. It doesn't come in full sentences. Comes as knowing, as presence, as the truth you've always known, finally giving you permission to speak itself out loud. Your purpose is not something you create, something you remember. And every time you say no to what dims you, every time you walk away from what tries to silence you, every time you choose yourself when the world expects you to shrink, you are honoring that promise made the moment you were born. You were not sent here to prove anything. You were sent to awaken. And so if you feel something stirring, like a bell ringing softly in your chest, like your hands trembling without reason, like tears forming in silence. You are not broken. You are remembering. And what you are remembering is this: your life was never random. Your path has never been ordinary. Your presence was always sacred. You don't need confirmation from the world. You don't need proof from your past. You only need to close your eyes, breathe in, and whisper to your soul, I am ready to receive what was once hidden, because you are. And the guardians who stood beside your mother that day, they are watching still, waiting with reverence, because the one they protected is finally waking up. Gate 3. The name your soul still remembers. There is a moment in every Sagittarius's journey when the names they've been called no longer feel like home. The ones given by family, spoken by teachers, printed on documents, stitched into uniforms, all useful, yes, but none of them quite you. They sound right to the world but hollow inside your body. You respond to them out of habit, out of necessity, out of social rhythm, but not out of soul recognition. Because deep within you, Sagittarius, something has always whispered, that's not my real name. And you were right. You see, what most forget is that we are not born only into one identity. We arrive from realms that do not use language the way this world does. We come wrapped in vibration, carried on frequency, cloaked in a name that cannot be spoken. It must be remembered. Before you were called by your earthly name, you were known by a sound. Not a sound like thunder or voice or chime, but a frequency so subtle, it could only be heard by the ones who sent you here. That sound, that soul name, was whispered the moment your essence crossed into physical form. It echoed in the vibration of stars, in the rhythm of breath between dimensions, in the hush that comes before dawn. And when your mother held you for the first time, she may not have said it out loud, but something in her gaze revealed she knew she was holding a being not entirely of this world. Maybe she looked at you too long and then blinked back tears. Maybe she paused, as if trying to find words that didn't exist. Maybe she tried to explain what she felt, and stopped halfway. Not because she forgot, but because your name couldn't be captured in syllables. It could only be carried in silence. And so it was. You grew up being called what others believed you to be, by names that fit their understanding of who you were. Some may have been loving. Some may have been hurtful. Some may have shaped how you saw yourself for better or worse. But through it all, there was another name quietly humming beneath the surface. The true one. The eternal one. The one not written on any certificate, but etched into the fabric of your soul. Have you ever been called by name and felt nothing? As if the sound reached your ears but not your spirit? Have you ever met someone who looked at you with wonder, as if they saw something familiar in you, but didn't know how to name it? That is the memory of your soul name trying to break through, not to replace your earthly identity, but to awaken the part of you that was never meant to be forgotten. In sacred scriptures, it is said that to know your true name is to reclaim your divine path. In the book of Revelation there is a line, to the one who overcomes, I will give a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, known only to the one who receives it. That name, dear Sagittarius, is not a reward. It is a remembrance. And you have reached the part of your journey where the stone is being placed in your palm, not by another but by your own awakening. You don't need to know the exact letters. You don't need to translate it into a language. You only need to feel it. And here's how you'll know when it's near. Your body will respond before your mind understands. You'll hear music and begin to cry without knowing why. You'll feel chills during a moment of silence. You'll meet someone who doesn't know you and yet sees you. You'll wake up from dreams with symbols you can't explain, but that leave you trembling. These aren't coincidences. They are echoes. Each one a note from the name your soul still holds in full clarity. This name is not something you chase. It reveals itself when you are ready, when your defenses fall, when you stop performing, when you stop needing to be anything other than exactly who you are. It returns when you are still enough to listen, when the fire within you no longer burns for recognition but for remembrance. Because the soul does not care about applause. It seeks alignment. You were never meant to be just a role, just a label, just a version of someone else's expectations. You were meant to embody something timeless. That is why, even when everything in your outer world made sense, career, relationships, routine, you still felt hollow inside. Because the sound of your soul name had not yet been returned to you. But it's returning now. Not because someone is giving it to you, because you finally created enough stillness to hear it again. There's a story I once heard of a Sagittarius woman. She was vibrant, successful, full of laughter. But at night, when the world grew quiet, she'd feel something ache inside her chest. It wasn't sadness. It was longing. A kind of grief that had no source. She tried to explain it once and said, "It's like someone is calling me by the wrong name every day, and I can't correct them, because I don't know what the right name is." She wasn't being poetic. She was remembering. And one night in a dream she heard it. Not in English, not in any language she knew. Just a sound. Pure. Gentle. Resonant. When she woke, she couldn't repeat it. But her tears said everything. She didn't need to tell anyone. She had been found. Sagittarius, that can happen to you. Not because you are special above others, but because you are willing to remember. You are willing to go beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the names you were assigned, and return to the truth of who you are. You may not hear a word. You may not see a vision. But when your true name returns, you will feel different. You'll walk into rooms and no longer feel like shrinking. You'll speak, and your voice will carry the weight of something real. You'll stop needing to explain yourself. Because what once felt like a wound, the longing to be understood, has been replaced by the warmth of finally understanding yourself. That is your gift. Not to be renamed, but to reclaim. You will still carry your human name with grace. You will still respond when the world calls. But inside there will be something more. A sound, a truth, a flame that answers only to what is eternal. And if one day someone enters your life and says something that strikes a deep chord inside you, something you can't explain, don't dismiss it. Maybe they won't know what they've said. Maybe they won't even remember it. But your soul will. It always does. So now, Sagittarius, sit with this truth. You have not been lost. You've only been circling around a sound too sacred to rush. And now that you are quiet enough, now that you are wise enough, now that your fire burns not with urgency, but with reverence, your name is returning. Not as a word, as a knowing. Let it rise. And when it does, don't try to explain it. Just live from it. Because those who carry their soul name do not need to be understood. They are already whole. Gate 4. The light that has always known you. There is a silence that doesn't feel empty. A stillness that doesn't feel lonely. And when you arrive there, Sagittarius, you realize this silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something sacred. Something that has been waiting for you far longer than you've been searching. You did not find it through effort. You did not earn it through suffering. Came because you were finally ready to remember. That light you carry, it has always known you. There were nights years ago when you sat awake while the world slept. You couldn't explain the ache in your chest, the weight in your breath. No one was unkind. Nothing was wrong. And yet, something in you trembled as if something important had been forgotten. You whispered prayers into the dark, not knowing who was listening. You stared at ceilings and questioned your purpose. You smiled through days and survived nights, always sensing, something is trying to return to me. And now it has. But it doesn't return with grand fanfare. It doesn't arrive with prophecy or thunder. It comes like sunlight through a curtain, gentle, unannounced, and utterly undeniable. It arrives as stillness, as softness, as peace. And when it touches you, you realize you've spent so many years fighting to be seen by others, when the only one who truly needed to see you was you. This final gate is not about remembering a story. It is about embodying a light. It is about no longer reaching, explaining, proving, or begging. It is about sitting down in the center of your soul and saying, I am already here. Do you know how rare that is, Sagittarius? To arrive at yourself after all you've survived? After all the times you doubted your value, silenced your truth, deferred your joy for others? To be here now, gentle, glowing, no longer rushing toward anything, is the most sacred miracle of all. You've walked through fire and named it growth. You've wept in silence and called it strength. You felt invisible and convinced yourself it was humility. But now there is no need for disguise. The soul does not want to be hidden anymore. It wants to be lived. There is no longer a need to explain your depth, to translate your vision, to dilute your sensitivity. The people meant for this version of you will not need you to be less radiant to feel comfortable. They will not flinch in the presence of your truth. They will simply recognize you as one of their own. Someone who has also walked the long road of forgetting and found their way home. Because you, Sagittarius, are not just awakening. You are returning. And the one who returns does not return as a seeker. The one who returns becomes the flame. There are many who will not understand how you've changed. They will ask what happened. They will try to measure your transformation with the language of logic. They will say you seem different, softer, stronger, calmer, brighter. And they will not know that what they're witnessing is the presence of your soul fully inhabiting your life for the first time. You no longer need to fight to be chosen. You no longer need to explain your sensitivity. You no longer need to perform strength. Because what lives inside you now is not a performance, it is a presence. And it is enough. In Buddhist teachings, there is a concept called Tathagata, the one who has thus come. It refers to an awakened one who no longer seeks to become anything, but who simply is. Not defined by titles, status, or opinions. Just being in the fullness of their light. That is where you are now, Sagittarius. You are not at the beginning of a new race. You are standing in the holy aftermath of an ancient return. You have stepped out of the noise of needing to be special, and into the serenity of knowing you are sacred. Your mother once looked at you and trembled, not because she feared you, but because her spirit recognized what her words could never name. In your eyes, she saw the echo of something eternal. She didn't always know how to hold it. She didn't always know how to love it, but she remembered enough to protect it. And now, that protection no longer needs to come from silence, because you are ready to live what she once guarded. Do you feel that? The calm in your breath, the warmth behind your ribs, the steady beat of your heart that no longer races for permission. That is your light returning, not because you summoned it, but because you finally made enough room for it to enter. And what a gift it is! You have become your own sanctuary. And from this space, you will no longer look for signs that you are loved. You will no longer ask the world to validate your existence. You will wake up and move through the day not for applause, not for survival, but simply because being alive in your truth is enough reason to keep going. You have crossed the final threshold. And what lies beyond it is not more seeking. It is sovereignty. It is peace without conditions. It is love without needing to be earned. And as you walk forward from here, know this. You are not walking into a future. You are walking as the future, as a being who has reclaimed the sacred memory of their birth, as a soul who no longer fears their light, as a messenger of something divine that doesn't need to be named, only lived. So if your hands are trembling right now, if your eyes are wet, if your chest feels open in a way it hasn't in years, you are not breaking down. You are breaking open, and there is nothing left to prove, only light to walk in. You are the flame now. Let it shine. Conclusion. You were always the light you were looking for. Sagittarius, now that we've arrived at the end of this sacred remembrance, take a breath. Not the kind of breath that rushes in and out, but the kind that settles you, softens you, and roots you back into the miracle of your own presence. You were never just born. You arrived with light braided into your bones, with soul memory tucked behind your eyes, and a name too sacred for human language. What your mother never told you wasn't a secret withheld. It was a truth too holy to be spoken before its time. That time is now. You have walked through ancient gates tonight. You've stood beside the unseen presence who was there the moment you first cried. You've reached beneath the noise of your name and felt the quiet hum of your soul's true sound. You've remembered not just who you are, but why you are. And so we close with this. You are not here to be defined by the past. You are here to reclaim what was buried. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to live from the knowing that you were chosen before the world ever taught you to question. Speak this softly as a sacred decree. I, Sagittarius, was never lost. I have always carried the light. Today, I return to the truth my soul has always known. If you feel this message touch something ancient within you, leave those words in the comments. Let them echo into the soul of someone else still remembering. And if this journey brought you home to yourself like this video, subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom and share it with someone you love. Let this be the moment we rise together. You are not waiting anymore. You are awakening. And the light is not ahead of you. It is within you.